A special focus on the state DOTs is essential to cracking the code leading to advancing greater use of FRP composites in bridge building and maintenance and with concrete reinforcement, which significantly extends the life of concrete structures. Under the able leadership of ACMA's President Cindy Squires, we're back in the game at the federal policy level. There continues to be evolving opportunities made possible by the federal bipartisan infrastructure bill's funding. She also understands that the name of the game in the federal aid highway program is state-level policy engagement. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, or IJA as we'll refer to it, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is proving to be what was advertised. There are an array of opportunities for the composite sector throughout IJA. Joe Fox, a leading industry voice and advocate, is also joining us today on our panel. Joe will focus on the broad array while I focus on one example, perhaps the most challenging and maybe frustrating, bridges. Under the Federal Aid Highway Program, approaching federal funding annually, just the federal share of about $50 billion a year, add the state and federal match, you have well over $100 billion a year, year in and year out. State DOTs are entirely responsible for the determination as to whether a contractor will bid your systems or products under the Federal Aid Highway Program. The program has long been described in law as federally assisted but state administered. The state DOT influence on our county and local transportation infrastructure agencies when it comes to the use of important innovations cannot be overstated. Bridge standards and specifications right at the top of the list. Local bridge owners, our cities, towns, and counties, are chronically underfunded when it comes to bridge maintenance. Any local officials listening are nodding their heads right now. Our objective is to translate these realities to policymakers at the state level to ensure they understand the sustainability, constructability, and life cycle benefits that will be gained if state DOTs prioritize the resources necessary to incorporate FRP composite materials in their bridges and structures. Infrastructure agencies have an obligation to foster marketplace competition under the Federal Aid Highway Program. That's not happening in the bridge market to the extent that it could, based on the current success of many versions of bridge technology. It's also the right thing to do for taxpayers and the environment. So why now? IJA includes the largest bridge investment since the building of the interstate highway system. A bridge formula program of $27.5 billion and a bridge investment grant program of $12.5 billion. $40 billion in investment in bridges in the next 5 years. The rising costs, limited availability, and historical volatility of steel and other traditional materials is another contributing factor. Increased focus on sustainability, climate change, and resiliency by the federal government and many state DOTs is another. Funding for locally owned off-system bridges. Federal funds can be used for 100% of the cost of repairing and replacing these assets under that program. Finally, the Tribal Transportation Program received upwards of $800 million. So a number of elements within the bridge program have historic and unprecedented levels of funding. The composite industry is already making valuable contributions toward expanding knowledge in state DOTs about FRP infrastructure. We must, however, focus on facilitating engagement among state DOTs at both the structural engineering and policy level in order to pick up the pace. I can tell you from experience, when I served as Deputy Commissioner of Maine DOT, the opinion of the bridge engineer is paramount, with good reason. The University of Maine, I used to say to my bridge audiences back when I served as administrator, the last thing I want is a cavalier bridge engineer. But we also expect them to do what they can aggressively to advance innovation in bridge building. The University of Maine's Advanced Structures and Composites Center, led by Dr. Habib Dagher, invented what was then known as the bridge in a backpack. Maine DOT funded the construction of several bridges in the mid-2000s to enable researchers and developers to conduct the necessary testing and monitoring of the new arch composite bridge structure in the ground. It proved to be essential to moving the new technology through the bridge community in Maine, which is now a leader in the nation in composite bridge building. I was in Pittsfield, Maine, when the first bridge of its kind was installed in 2005, the origin of my own personal passion for bridge composite technology. My challenge to public infrastructure policy leadership is to embrace the composite industry's offer to work with your state DOT, with your frontline structural and design engineers, as well as with your consulting engineering community on the opportunities and benefits FRP composites in your structures and concrete reinforcement can bring. I wrote and published the following policy case a couple of years ago, and I think it applies now more than ever. And it goes on to say, advancing the use of materials like fiber-reinforced polymers in our public infrastructure is compelling and urgent, not to mention proven and tested. The use of non-corrosive, resilient, and sustainable materials, practices, and technologies used in the development and construction of our state and local transportation infrastructure should become a policy prerequisite as government and business elevate the battle against climate change. Expanding the use of proven and tested, strong and durable, non-corrosive composites to build our infrastructure is the ultimate in sustainable infrastructure. This isn't aspirational, it's happening today. The promise of composite bridge technology and its potential application to a wide array of bridge sites is an important step in extending the life cycle of bridges, accelerating bridge construction, and substantially reducing or eliminating the cost of bridge maintenance. Huge advantage to local and county governments. Under the Federal Aid Highway Program, the demonstration project has long been an effective tool for state DOTs to demonstrate specific technology in an accelerated manner to advance the state of knowledge for their own departments and other jurisdictions, such as county and local transportation infrastructure owners. The following are three elements that summarize the policy case, and I believe every state DOT CEO in America should take to heart. Infrastructure innovation always requires policy-level leadership combined with the essential engagement of the civil engineering discipline, in this case, the bridge community. Composite bridge technology, in addition to having clear sustainability advantages, will effectively bring clear benefits in value to the public's long-term bridge assets owned and managed by state and local agencies. The presence of these competitive advanced materials in your marketplace meaning the state DOTs, will create more competition to the traditional steel and precast products. Competition is essential to competitive prices in any marketplace. That is why the Federal Aid Highway Program and state procurement policies do and should encourage competition. That's the IV policy case. We're making progress because the cost of steel is high, if you can get it, combined with an historic level of federal bridge funding for states and locals over the life of Egypt. But the progress is painfully slow, and that is in part due to being victims of our own success. True story. A colleague was circulating at a bridge meeting after having presented on his company's technology associated with composite bridge opportunities. A state bridge engineer of some influence expressed that he was impressed and interested in the possibilities. And it was a state that was interested in actually employing other composite applications in their state. But the bridge engineer confessed there was no way they could entertain its use because they were out straight. My friends, that reality is an innovation killer. I think the composites industry has the technology and is prepared to invest in more capacity development as the market grows. These bridge engineers are out straight. He wasn't wrong, which makes it all the more important than ever for the state DOTs to find more efficient ways of opening their programs and markets for a new competitive, resilient, and robust material for their bridges and structures. States are making design decisions on projects right now and just received their second-year allocation under EJA, another installment of over $5 billion. The industry needs to support DOTs, and state DOTs need to invest in the expertise or process necessary to conduct their state's due process, which is different for every state DOT, which is at best a challenge. I think there's a role for AASHTO's National Transportation Product Evaluation Program, NETPEP, in the industry to collaborate. It can be done, and it can be accelerated. One of my most memorable EDC initiatives, and one of the most impactful, was our first EDC round in 2010. It's called warm mix asphalt. Just recently, I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Audrey Copeland, the president and CEO of the National Asphalt Paving Association. In 2009, I arrived at Federal Highway from Maine DOT to report for duty as Victor Mendez's deputy administrator. Ended up spearheading EDC, and Audrey was a Federal Highway Materials engineer at the time on the team that was pitching warm mix asphalt. Her leadership potential was pretty clear back then. It became one of my passions because the value proposition was so clear. Asphalt mix that requires less heat and energy to produce, extends the paving season in cold weather states, and can be hauled longer distances. Pretty simple, pretty effective value proposition. In 2010, when Federal Highway with NAPA's and industry support rolled out the initiative, warm mix asphalt represented about 4% of national asphalt production. Warm mix asphalt today is 40%, which is a pretty remarkable growth over that period of time. Dr. Copeland has always given the EDC partnership a lot of credit for that progress. She also said that the reduced greenhouse gas emissions associated with that achievement amounts to about the equivalent of 200,000 cars year in and year out. So the policy objective, the collaboration between Federal Highway, the states, and the industry resulted in that outcome. And it was essential that the industry see the commitment on behalf of the states to advance this technology in order for them to justify investing in the plant and equipment necessary to produce. In some cases, in states across the country, they are utilizing about 80% of their asphalt demand using warm mix asphalt. So state DOTs collectively have significant market power over a program with an annual combined expenditures of well over $100 billion a year, and that's growing. So it can be done. We've launched the hashtag We Can Do Better, and that's our objective, and that's, I think, clearly the objective of ACMA and other composite interests that are out there advocating and promoting the use of composites in structures. It makes sense, and it's timely.